Marvel Crisis Protocol, a game we love, we enjoy, and we want to learn how to play well. But some rules can get a little tricky. I'm James from Midwest Protocol, and today we're going to be talking all about 10 easy to miss rules in Marvel Crisis Protocol. Let's dive in. Rule number 1, the priority roll. Do you know how the priority roll is supposed to be determined? Well, you can easily just play rock, paper, scissors or draw numbers out of a hat, but the official way is by rolling 5 dice, and whoever has the most crits, hits, and wilds combined has priority. And if there's a tie, it goes in the order of crits, then wilds, then hits. And if there's a tie after that, you re-roll everything. I've seen this rule messed up so many times where people just roll a single die or they roll all of them and they just count all of the crits. But if you want to play the official way, this is how you do it. Rule number 2, the movement tools. Did you know that you can only use 2 tools at once? And they cannot be of the same type whatsoever. So you can't use a range and a range tool or a movement and a movement. And normally this isn't a big deal or a huge hindrance on the game, but it's a pretty easy one to mess up when you get into placing characters. One of the most common ways we see this played out is whenever a character uses a place. So for example, they place at range 2, but then the player says, oh, I want to place within range 2, but would be within range 1 of this point on the board. That would effectively be using a range 2 and a range 1 tool at the same time. The caveat of this is you can do a long move, be within range 1. That is a completely legal play because you're using 2 different types of tools. So it's very valid to say, hey, I want to move up to this point, but be within range 1. And as long as you're using 2 different types of tools, that's completely valid. Rule number 3, overlapping. Did you know you cannot overlap the edge of terrain or overlap another character on the board? Well, it's officially not allowed, and you have to be able to fit your character wholly on a piece of terrain to be able to end your movement there. So if you are moving and you just a portion of your character is just over the edge, you can't end there. You have to move back to the last valid position, whether that's on the terrain completely, or you have to go back until the most recent final position where you fit completely on the board. Rule number 4, Incinerate. Did you know that Incinerate does not affect dodge rolls? Incinerate specifically reduces your defense dice by 1. Effectively, it only matters whenever an enemy character is attacking your character. So your defense die, whatever that number is on your character stat sheet, still applies to crisis effects and also to dodge rolls. So if someone's throwing terrain at you and you have Incinerate, hey, good for you. You still get to use your physical defense on that roll. Rule number 5, throwing a character. Throwing a character in Marvel Crisis Protocol is one of the most thematic and exciting interactions that can occur on the game, as long as you're doing it right. So you just want to make sure that the one thing to always remember is when you are throwing a character, you are always measuring from the thrown character, not from the thrower whatsoever. Another interesting note, which also correlates back to our overlapping rule, is that if you throw a character, you ignore your throwing character's base, which means the thrower can throw a character that is next to them through their base into another character. And if there is no landing space eligible on the other side of the thrower, the thrown character goes back to the original or last possible spot next to the thrower. It's a pretty cool interaction to be aware of, and it makes throwing characters even more exciting. Rule number 6, throwing terrain. Throwing terrain is another thematic great element of the game, and since we talked about throwing characters, let's talk about terrain. Whenever you throw terrain, you are always measuring from the thrower's base, not the terrain whatsoever. So basically the turn would go like this. You decide that you want to throw terrain, as long as you're within range of it, you select that terrain and it gets destroyed. Make sure you note the size of the terrain for the dice roll that's going to come up later, and then you measure with whatever tool it is, whether it's a short, medium, long, however the range tool is dependent on the character card, from the thrower's base to the target. As long as the target is within range, you can throw, no big deal. Also, another thing to note about throwing terrain is that if a character or another piece of terrain is on top of the terrain, when the thrown terrain is destroyed, so imagine a building with a character on top, when that building is thrown, the character on top drops down that exact position onto the board or the terrain beneath it. So the character is not affected that's on top of the terrain, but you can still throw the terrain. This also means that if 2 characters are on the same piece of terrain, one of them can pick up the terrain they're standing on and throw it at the other character. Rule number 7, cover and line of sight. Cover and line of sight rules in this game are pretty simple and easy to know, a little different than other games if you've played any other type of miniature wargaming or skirmish game. But there's a few simple steps to figure out if you have line of sight or if you have cover, or both. Let's start with cover. Cover is determined by 3 pieces of criteria. First is the character within range 1 of a piece of terrain the same size or larger than the character. Second, can a line be drawn from the character's base to the attacking character's base that goes through that piece of terrain? And third is the attacker outside of range 2 of the defender. If you can answer yes to all 3 of those questions, then you have cover and you can modify one of your defense dice to a block in the modified defense step. Line of sight in this game is pretty simple, and you just think about it from a top-down view. As long as the attacking character can draw a line from their base to the defending character's base, and they can see just even a piece of it, they have line of sight. But if the defending character is wholly behind a piece of terrain, they cannot see that character as long as the terrain is larger than the character itself. So a size 2 character behind a size 3 piece of terrain, the attacking character does not have line of sight. But if a character of size 4 was behind a size 2 piece of terrain, it doesn't matter if there is a line that is drawn through the terrain or not, the attacking character can definitely see that size 4 character. Another thing to note is when a defending character is standing on top of terrain, their size is combined with the size of the terrain, effectively making them a larger number for line of sight purposes. Most commonly noted would be a size 2 or size 3 on top of a size 2 piece of terrain, which would make that a size 4 or a size 5 character. So for line of sight purposes, they become very easy to see for attackers anywhere on the board. Rule number 8, generating power. Power is what fuels every aspect of this game, whether it's from attacks, superpowers, team tactics cards, to crises, everything. We need that power. We need that power. But generating it can be a little tricky, and one of the most often confused or missed rules is the fact that special conditions and certain crises do not actually generate power for you. So for example, bleed, even though it does a point of damage to you at the end of your activation, it does not give you power for that point of damage. Also, certain crises do not give you power. You will know which crises give you power. It will specifically say it on the crisis card if the receiving damage will give you power. So for example, struggle for the cubes, it does give you power. You take a wound and you gain a power, while gamma wave sweeps through the Midwest does a point of damage to you if you are outside the range of the shelters, but that does not give you a power. Just remember, if the card doesn't say you get power and it's not an enemy effect, you probably don't get that power. Rule number 9, Grunt activation. Grunts are a relatively new addition to Marvel Crisis Protocol in the past year or two, and it can be a little daunting to learn how they work, especially if you kind of glaze over the rule book, which I'm not saying I did that, but definitely saying you didn't do that either. Just to always remember with grunts though, they activate on the same turn as their parent character, and they always activate before the parent. Say I am activating Ultron Metal Tyrant and his drones. On Ultron's turn, the drones activate first. They will perform their actions and then they will finish, and then Ultron Metal Tyrant will go next. If for whatever reason Ultron Metal Tyrant gets dazed or KO'd, then the drones cannot activate because their parent character does not activate on their turn. Last but not least, rule number 10, reaction timing. So if there is ever a reaction that conflicts on the board, so an attacker and a defender both have, after the effect is resolved, reactions, always do it in this order. Attacker performs their reaction first, then the defender, and then if there ever applies, the crisis then also occurs at that point. But if there's ever something that's like before the attack happens, that kind of thing, that will supersede any of that stuff, right? So just always remember, easy. If there's ever conflicting reactions, attacker, defender, then crisis. That's it, guys. 10 easy to miss rules for Marvel Crisis Protocol. One of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because as I have been learning the game this past year, there have been tons of rules that I have glazed over or missed in play, and I just kind of find them out as I go. But it makes me a better player, and I feel like this is something that happens all the time, and learning a new tabletop game, if this is your first time like me, can be a little daunting, especially if you show up to a game shop and everyone knows the rules and you're just kind of still a little shaky. I just wanted to provide content for you to help you learn how to play Marvel Crisis Protocol even better. So if you think you have some ideas or you want some more content like this, please Feel free to comment below on what you would like to see on this channel, what other rules and affiliations you would like to see covered as we dive deep into easy rules to miss. But if you're looking for battle reports, we also cover some of those on this channel as well. Well, thanks for sticking around, guys. If you could, please like the video. That goes a long way. And if you want to see more battle reports or videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. I'm James with Midwest Protocol, and with that, let's get back to gaming.